Elaine Ellinger over there in Canada, thank you so much for being part of my channel again. This is the third time we've had discussions on the channel. It's such a joy and a privilege. I know the word expert is sometimes a bit of a cliched term or word, but you really do know your stuff when it comes to Islam, the Quran, and the doctrines in the Quran, and more importantly, Islam in the West, Islam in Europe and in North America.
Yeah,
Now,
from a non-Islamic perspective, let's have more of
yes,
that.
yes, and your wonderful readable book. I've read a copy of that already. We'll talk about that very briefly, a bit more later in this
Mhm.
half-hour program. But Elaine, they're at it again, and I'm sure it's not just in the UK, but
Never stops.
no, the government are sort of slightly under the radar in a slightly surreptitious way, a vague sort of way, trying to uh, redefine, re-establish what constitutes Islamophobia, what we're allowed to say and think, what we're not allowed to say and think, what constitutes anti-Muslim hatred and what doesn't. This has gone a bit quiet again now, but a couple of weeks ago they were on about it yet again, and I know you've heard similar several times in Canada. What's your reaction, Elaine? How should people respond to this? How should people view this?
Well, there's an absolute tsunami of people online now, social media that are complaining about Islam in their country, and they've had enough. They're absolutely fed up to the teeth. And they're not only fed up to the teeth with Islam, they're fed up to the teeth with the government reaction to it. Now, just recently, for example, we had the Palestinian ambassador, meaning Keir Starmer, and of course that was making the rounds as well because he greeted him in the way that a young Muslim boy is taught to greet another Muslim. Okay, that you
Right.
take their hand, you hold their hand until they let go, and you may kiss them on the head. And millions of people witnessed this greeting between the Palestinian ambassador and Keir Starmer. And it was very, very strange, very strange. And you can't help but notice this in the highest echelons of British government. And it's extremely alarming because it's very, very clear that they know next to nothing about Islam, and whether that's deliberate or not, nobody really knows. But so what do they want to do? They want to silence people like you and me and the millions of others, thank goodness, who are starting to speak out now. And they really can't do it because, what they have brought in now, which is merely a guideline, is something they did in Canada in 2017. We had Bill M103. It was the same thing. It's all about Islamophobia. And, people have had enough. It has no teeth. It is not a statute. The statutes haven't changed at all. They've been kicking around this definition for, I think it first came out actually in 2018, 2019. Some different ministries were adopting this, agencies were adopting this, but it's not surprising because you've now got so many people who adhere to Islam in very prominent places in British government. And it's not just, Shabana Mahmood. You've got a mufti by the name of Patel in charge of education. And just look at what's happening in the schools now is that, British children are not only hugely outnumbered and bullied, just like they are in Europe, because they've been taught that they need to be, so accommodating to Islam and that it is racist or Islamophobia not to be accommodating to Islam. What a thing to be teaching children. They should be taught to be proud of Britain. And that's what they used to be, Hail Britannia, for heaven's sakes, bring that back and bring it back soon while you've still got a country because it's rapidly being taken over. And the only thing that's going to stop that, which we can talk about a little bit later because it's at the end of my book, is enduring legislative change, enduring irrevocable legislative change. That really has to be introduced and soon while it's still possible. But as for this definition they've brought in, it's totally incredible. It makes no sense. It's illogical. there are so many reasons to fear Islam. And, some famous person said, we have nothing to fear but fear itself, because if it immobilizes us, then it's going to run right over us. And it seems to have immobilized a lot of people in the government, and that's really got to stop.
Elaine, we've touched on this before, but so many people, particularly on the left, will respond by saying, "Yes, but you're talking about radical Islam, extremist Islam,
No,
extremist interpretations." That's what
no, no.
people keep coming back to me with. But yeah, you'll get that in all religions. The majority of Muslims are live and let live. They're not like that. Why do you keep focusing on the extremist fundamentalist
No,
interpretations?
no,
That's
no. I'm focusing on the
profoundly
doctrine. This is what the doctrine teaches. If there's a few people that don't
yes,
follow it, I mean,
yes.
if you want to look at Canada, apparently Prime Minister Trudeau is supposed to be Catholic. Does he seem like a Catholic to you? No, not at all. He's out there, pushing for abortion and things like that. Now, it's like,
Yeah.
if you're talking about individuals, how individuals behave, and there's a few individuals who are not at this time following Islam to its full extent. You just give it time, because as Islam gets stronger and stronger, they won't have any choice. And to believe, otherwise is foolhardy. And so many people prefer to do that. It's a lot more comfortable. There are some major campaigns underway in Europe and elsewhere that are trying to convince people that it's perfectly normal for a Muslim to be drinking alcohol, or, having a same-sex lover, or, not wearing a hijab. All of these things are absolute lies. They are absolute lies. And Islam simply won't tolerate it. And once it
No,
has power, because that is the goal of Islam. And in fact, I can give you a definition from a school book here. I have one handy somewhere here. It keeps disappearing on me. Come on. I want to bring it over and read it to you directly. What it says about jihad. Okay. What the children are taught about the cause of Allah. And now this is from the Quran. It's Quran 960.
right.
And the second pillar of Islam, what is supposed to be the second most important pillar of Islam, the most important pillar is prayer. All right. 5 times a day. And 17 times a day, they pray what's called al-Fatiha, which ends with, do not let us go, guide us so that we are not like those who go astray, which the Hadith tell you are the Christians, or those with whom you're angry, and those are the Jews. Now, this is prayed 17 times a day. Like, the amount of ritual that is forced on young children is truly incredible. But one of the
Yeah.
things that they have to learn is that the Quran says, all right, that there is this zakat where they pay alms. We're told it's alms, but it has 8 categories. And what they're taught in school, the 7th category, I'll read it to you right from the school book. The 7th category, where zakat can be spent, according to Quran 960, is spending in the way of Allah. This refers to jihad. Okay, this is a grade 8 school book. To jihad, fighting for the sake of Allah. It means giving help to a struggle for making Islam supreme on earth. How many Islamic schools do you have in the UK right now? I mean, hundreds of Islamic schools teaching this. It is significant to realize that jihad, or striving, is not restricted to armed struggle only. It can also include writing, lecturing, and organizing work to support or defend Islam. So I've kind of got on to the next subject here.
Elaine, just taking a very brief step sideways, there seems to be this sort of irrational, disproportionate preference for and favoring of Islam over Christianity amongst many people on the left, or hard left, far left. And this
uh,
is very, very strange. Why on earth is this happening, Elaine? I just don't get it. Doesn't make sense.
well, we've got 2 or 3 generations that have been raised to hate themselves, hate everything about our own country, and Islam never does that. So in school, the children are told diversity is our strength, and Islam will only ever present a good side of Islam. And of course, they're vetting a lot of the school books. They're introducing what they want to. And you're not, Islam does not allow critique, and we do nothing but critique ourselves. So that's it. I mean, the children are being taught wrong, and they're they're going to the school grounds and they're outnumbered, and some of them are converting just to make it stop. And that's another whole subject. But I want to get back to the subject of zakat, okay? Because
please do.
I was saying that it's the second pillar of Islam, and they're required to pay this if they reach a certain threshold. Now, recently, you had this event with a Sikh, and he had a restaurant, and he put in his window proudly no halal. All right. Everyone should be doing that. Everyone should be doing that, because halal food raises zakat, and zakat finances jihad. It's that simple. Now, fairly recently, a woman who I'm connected to on Substack, and I would credit her for this, except her name isn't there. And she shared it with me specifically because she knows I talk about zakat all the time. And she had written to your British authorities to point out to them that Part 3 of the Terrorism Act 2000 criminalizes terrorist financing and makes it an offense to use, possess, or raise funds for the purpose of terrorism. So paying zakat tax should be an offense under the UK anti-terrorist legislation. I mean, what a wonderful letter. And she prefaced that. I'll just read a bit of it here. She begins by saying that the zakat tax is one of the 5 pillars. Like I've said, it's the second pillar. It's considered the second most important pillar. And the largest zakat tax registered charity in the UK is the National Zakat Foundation.
Right.
Now, when you look up Fi Sabilillah, which is the same category that the Canadian National Council of Muslims is authorized to collect zakat under, okay, this enormous organization in Canada, which sends piles and piles of information to the schools, guidelines, booklets, exercises for the children to do, videos and things like that. And the schools lap it all up because they're busy being, diverse. Yeah. But they are also funded under this category of Fi Sabilillah, which is jihad. It's jihad. And our governments blithely give them charitable status. Now, what she did was she looked up some of the tafsir, they're commentaries on this. And she quotes some of them here. Okay, and this is from Ibn Kathir, one I use a lot. And it says, for the cause of Allah is exclusively for those fighting in jihad. They are to be given what they need to fight, such as weapons, horses, and other equipment, even if they are wealthy in their own right. And what I read you from the children's school book says that you can use the money so long for journalism, things like that, so long as it brings about the goal of the supremacy of Islam. So it says, the 7th category is for those people engaged in Islamic military operation who are not paid enough by the government. So a leading Hanbali jurist wrote, it is not permissible to use zakat funds for building mosques or paving roads under this category because the term has a specific meaning, military jihad. And here we have a footnote from Al-Madudi. Now, that is another well-known tafsir commentary on Islam, highly respected on the Quran. And he writes that Allah's cause stands for jihad in the path of Allah. That is the struggle to eradicate systems based on kufr. That's us, based on disbelief. Christianity or whatever, it doesn't matter. Hinduism, if it is not Islam, it is kufr. Okay, so it is designed to help in the struggle to eradicate systems based on kufr, to establish the Islamic system in their stead. Therefore, the zakat funds may be utilized to meet the expenses of the journeys people make, or for procuring means of conveyance, equipment, weapons, or other articles for jihad, irrespective of whether they are well off or not. So you can pay this to anybody who is working towards jihad.
Yeah.
So jihad in the way of Allah is much more comprehensive term than mere fighting. Jihad applies to all those efforts that are made to degrade the word of the kufr, to exalt the word of Allah, to establish the Islamic system of life, whether by propagating the message of Allah in the initial stage or by fighting in the final stage of the struggle. So
Right. Yeah.
taken together, is not paying zakat then an offense under the terrorist legislation? Now, I know this letter was sent to them, and that Part 3 of the Terrorism Act says that that is a criminal offense to use, possess, or raise funds for that purpose. And did the Charity Commission undertake thorough due diligence before the decision to award registered charity status to the National Zakat Foundation? And if investigations were to reveal that zakat does indeed fund terrorism, then could government ministers and senior civil servants be guilty of professional negligence in public office or of being legally complicit? Now, about 7 years ago, I sent a letter anonymously to the Canadian Revenue Service, and I sent it anonymously because I had no idea who would be opening it. The Canadian government, the security services, all of these have been heavily infiltrated. The education system, everything has been heavily infiltrated by people who are pursuing this goal of Islamic supremacy. So when I sent it about 7 years ago, 2020, I think I sent it, I spelled out all of this about zakat and said, you have authorized charitable status to the National Canadian Council of Muslims, which used to be called CARE Canada, which Texas has now declared is a terrorist organization. And yet nothing ever came of it. Our governments are doing this, and I can't believe they don't know.
Elaine, this might be stating the obvious to many people, but does it all come back to this, the fact that Western governments, the reason they're doing what they're doing, like for example with zakat, is because they are very afraid, if not terrified, of upsetting or offending Islam's in
Well, a
Muslims
lot
in the
of them are
West.
simply ignorant. Like, well, there goes that funny noise again. They're simply ignorant. They have absolutely no idea what to do. They've got themselves into this position,
Yeah,
and governments tend not to admit there's a problem until they have some idea what they're going to do about it. And because they don't know anything about Islam, they seek information from people who adhere to it, which just
right.
gets the country in deeper and deeper. So
Yes.
I'm very, very happy to see that there are many more voices speaking out. I know that my book has made it, like a lot of people have suggestions, but I'm sorry, I have to say that they're simply inadequate. They are inadequate.
Yeah.
If you're going to, require that, marriages be registered, all marriages, no matter if they're marrying the third or the fourth wife or all of, it's too late for all of that.
Yeah.
It's just too late for these halfway measures. There needs to be legislative change. And my
Elaine, for
book,
those,
yeah.
yeah, Elaine, for those that are really gripped at this point by what they're listening to and watching here, but are still extremely new to this, just to backstep a little bit to the halal, the gentleman in London, the Sikh gentleman who refused
Yes,
to
yes.
deal with halal, just to very briefly to tell people what is halal and why is it a bad thing and why is it
Halal,
unacceptable,
halal
Elaine?
simply means lawful. Now, in Islam, everything in life falls into one of five categories. All right. It is either uh, permitted, okay, halal, lawful, okay, uh, or forbidden, discouraged, obligatory, or recommended. It's one of those five things. And
Right.
when something is halal, that means it's lawful. Well, according to Sharia, slavery is lawful. And it's been going on in Islamic countries for over 1,000 years now. And instead of teaching this in school, we're going on about the transatlantic slave trade to like America and things like that, and never mention the slaves that were taken from Britain, from Iceland, even that the trans-Saharan slave trade. So now I'm really getting off the subject, but it's
Mhm.
just that our schools are so teaching the children so badly. They know absolutely nothing about zakat. They are taught that all of the wars that Muhammad fought were defensive, and they weren't at all. He fought with all of his
Yeah,
neighbors, and
yeah,
they're just basically lied to. And it's up to the government to take the lead here. And the only way they can do this is through legislation. And it's quite simple. You establish a threshold, and all belief systems, or in France, organizations simply have to pass a simple threshold or they are not recognized legally. Now, that doesn't interfere with private belief, which is what it should be anyway. If you want to believe this, that's fine. But the charitable status and the finance and the
yeah,
halal marketing and slaughter and all the rest of it has to go. They get this because it is recognized as a legal belief system. It has status, when in fact what it's doing is seeking to replace the British way of life, the British legal system. With Islam, it is a religion with a state, not a state with a religion. Eventually, it takes over the state, just like it has in Afghanistan and elsewhere. And like the Sikh man, he puts in his window, proudly not halal. For Sikhs, it is forbidden to eat halal. You know that?
right.
Yes,
Now,
and so for him to put that sign in the window, he is doing what we should all be doing.
what
Is
what is halal slaughter, Elaine,
well, it
when it
raises
comes to
money for zakat, all right, and
right?
it might just be done in your backyard. Literally, a friend of mine, her one of the people she works with was talking about it and how they were just going to get an animal and take it to a neighboring town and slaughter it. Like, you know, it's they can't keep control of this. They aren't even trying to keep control of it. And I just want to say that when people buy halal, they are supporting zakat because some of the profits go to zakat, and zakat finances jihad. And so the
And
man was
zakat
doing absolutely the right thing.
and
No
zakat
halal.
is compulsory and obligatory for all Muslims who attend the mosque.
Well, we
Zakat
heard Rupert Lowe in Parliament saying that, the amount of halal production in Britain far exceeds the Islamic requirements, and it's being sold unlabeled to people. And so everyone should stop buying halal unless they're absolutely forced to because they're in that
wow,
community. Nobody should be buying it, but first you have to know you're buying it. So they should be definitely
wow,
demanding legislative action and demanding labeling and demanding a lot of things. And the idea that they can introduce a bill so that people won't speak about these things, it's ludicrous. If you don't speak about them, you haven't got a hope.
yeah. And just to emphasize once again, this is not about we are not,
No, we're talking about the
targeting.
legislation. It's
Yeah,
law. It's law, and the only way you can fight that is with law. And this goes for Muslims too. They don't have much choice, do they?
no, and we emphasize, don't we, often, Elaine, that we are not targeting or having a go
No,
at Muslims. We are addressing the doctrines which are in the Quran. We're not targeting or stigmatizing Muslim people. We're
of
talking
course.
about the doctrines in the
If
Quran.
anything, we're trying to help the Muslims that aren't able to speak out.
Yes.
They're in the minority, and if this carries on, everybody except dominant Islam is going to be in the minority. You and I will be in the minority as well, unless something changes. And I do want to point out that it's Quran 497 that says if you were oppressed in the land, meaning that you cannot fulfill this obligation of making Islam supreme, that's considered oppressed. You're supposed to leave of your own volition. You don't even have to pay for it. Okay. They are supposed to leave. They're following their own doctrine. They want to follow their own doctrine. That's what their doctrine says. And that is not a failing of the UK. That is a failing of Islam itself. It will fail the threshold because no other belief system requires, that apostates be killed or that women are perpetually forever in a lower status, or FGM and all of these things that come with Islam. No other belief system does this, and it's contrary to your Constitution, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and slavery. I mean, slavery is halal. You want it back or not?
Mm, I think we'll give that one a miss if we can. um, Elaine, let's just briefly mention your book, which is available on Amazon for people
Oh,
to
yeah.
go and look at that
Here we go.
right now. I've had the pleasure of reading it, very readable.
Yes.
I'm so glad you've got, I admit I haven't got a copy in front of me, and I'm so glad you've held it up because I was apprehensive that I was going to
And
get that
I,
title slightly wrong again, get the order slightly wrong.
I,
Civilizational Reckoning.
yeah, I came up with the idea for the cover and then
Yeah.
noticed we've got the same do.
Yeah.
But
Understanding
it,
the
it
future,
ends by very
reclaiming the,
clearly pointing out the legislative changes that are possible, easily
yeah,
possible. It's just a category change. They do this
yeah,
all the time anyway. Do you qualify or don't you qualify? It's very simple. And the threshold just simply needs to meet with your own constitution, Universal
yeah.
Declaration of Human Rights. It couldn't be easier. And you'll
So
have
it's a,
all of this support for people who really do care about Britain and who do care about
yeah.
human rights
So it's
and
although
little children.
the book is very dark, but it's got a wonderfully optimistic and
Absolutely.
objectively, in a grounded way, it's optimistic about exactly how we get out of this.
It certainly is.
Um,
And it speaks for
because,
Muslims too.
because very briefly, just to conclude, what I remember, and we're in this time now, it's actually happening. I remember about 20 years ago, a very elderly, my great aunt, my grandmother's sister, was very elderly at the time, lovely lady, 20 odd years ago, and she said, "You just wait." She said, "We'll be taken over by the Muslims." Now, she said that in about, oh, well over 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was sort of thinking, no, no, not sure about that.
Yeah.
And other people in the family were saying, oh, no, no, that's nonsense. And, you'd have to try and sort of dissect her psyche to understand why she would say such a thing. But there was a part of me that thought, maybe she has got a point here, even though I was only in my early 20s. But yeah,
Well,
she did have a point, and here we are,
yeah.
20
Well,
odd
because
years
that's
later.
what Islam does. It's what
Yeah, yeah,
Islam does. It always does. Islam teaches that prophets go to their own nation, but Muhammad came to all mankind, and that it is up to Islam to enforce it and to make sure that it becomes supreme. That is the goal of Islam, and it includes all of the laws. Sharia is that is the law of Islam, and it covers everything. And if people don't want it, for goodness sakes, start learning the difference between a theocracy and a religion. It is not a religion; it is a deen. It is a way of
yeah,
life, and that is and one of the principles is the walla wal bara, which is enmity and loyalty to the ummah. And that's another thing. We need to end this, but I just want to
yeah,
mention
yeah,
that people need to understand that the ummah, the global community of Islam, is a nation. They always think nations should have borders, but Islam doesn't. And they share language. All of the prayers, all of the supplications, all of the things they're supposed to say in a day, and it's incredibly ritualistic, are all in Arabic. So it doesn't matter where you're from. You're all going to be speaking the same language. You're going to be following the same law. You're going to be paying the same taxes that finance the same activities. It is a complete nation, and it is global now. And unless you want to be dominated by it, then you absolutely have to push back and say, no, Britain is a nation and it is not an Islamic nation, and we're going to keep it that way.
Elaine Ellinger, thank you so much, and I look forward to speaking to you again very soon. Always a privilege and a joy. I really mean that. Thank you, and keep up the great work. And here's to next time. Thank you, Elaine.
Thank you. Really nice to be here. Okay. Bye.